Hey guys, it's Olivia here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you part 2 of my discussion videos on explicit scenes in young adult and new adult fantasy books. So if you missed the first part, I'll leave a link to that up there or down below, and you can definitely go and check it out. In this one I said we're going to be looking at specific scenes in fantasy books, but because I thought that would get too spoilery, I'm going to just be looking at specific books and how they handle it. And this one is going to be an entirely spoiler-free video, so if you've read any of these books or if you haven't, it doesn't matter, you can still watch this video. So what we're going to be doing is rating these fantasy books that I got in my fantasy haul, link to that up there and down below as well, from the worst sexual representation to the best sexual representation. And I'll just be talking about the sex, and it won't be like analysing how good the sex is, but the messages that the novels give you from it. So for the least in position, we've got Winter Song by S.J. Jones. I found this to be a very problematic portrayal of sex in fantasy, and this one is I would definitely say young adult, because mature young adult, because she's just not new adult mentality, so she can't be a new adult anyway. So in this one, she spends a lot of the book begging for sex. Like, the guy keeps saying no because you're not ready yet, but then when they do have sex, she wakes up the next morning and she's like, I'm transformed, I am a woman now, I am someone different, and she kind of uses the sex to find her identity. And I don't think that is a message you should be giving to mature teenagers. Sex is not what defines you. Sex is not what makes you a woman. It's an experience. The first time you're having an experience, it is groundbreaking in the fact that it's the first time. It's definitely something you're going to note down in your life, you know? But it doesn't change who you are as a person, and I think giving that message that sex is something that's going to break out a whole new mold of who you are and change your personality and everything and make you more mature is the wrong message to give, because that is not what sex does. And because of that, I couldn't really recommend this book at all. Then the next one, for quite low, we're going to have Uprooted by Naomi Novik, and I would say that this one is new adult from the definition that I gave before of the girl has left her home and she's now an independent woman and she's coming into her like sexual side of things and all that. So the sex in this one is so problematic. Like, I couldn't like this book because of how problematic it was, and that's because in the beginning there's an attempt of sexual assault, and basically the main character, Dragon, he's not the one who does it, but he's kind of there. And after the whole ordeal has happened, everything's happened, she's like, I didn't expect this, like, why did it happen to me? And he's like, well, if you didn't want to be sexually assaulted, these are not the literal words, but he almost specifically says, well, if you didn't want it, why were you dressed like that? And I was like, hold up, he did not just say that it's her fault because of the way that she was dressed, but she doesn't contradict what he said, and he doesn't it's not discussed and unpacked, and it's not made a correction that she's not to blame and her clothes are not to blame, which is a very, very bad thing, because that argument is used way too much to excuse rape, and it's not valid, it's not true, and I just can't believe that this book included it and just glossed over it. As well as that, there's also a character who uses words like slut and just derogatory sexual terms when describing her, and it's kind of like glossed over and not unpacked, and she just accepts it and moves on with her life, and I'm just like, no, that's not right. So when you're reading explicit scenes in young adult or new adult fantasy novels, we need to make sure that the representation or the messages given are being done well, and I would have to say that these two books are not doing it well, and that is problematic and it needs to be changed. Next up, we've got the Shatta New Series by Tahira Murphy, and I'm going to classify this one as young adult just because the main character is really got a lot of things she needs to do to grow first, and maybe this one, like Ignite Me, the final one, could be seen as new adult, but definitely these two are young adult, and it doesn't get more explicit in the first two other than like heavy petting and just like lots of touching each other and just kissing and all that. But then in the last one there is some sexual scenes, but it's like explicit, but it doesn't really use the terminology, and it kind of dances around it a little bit and then it like fades out the scene. So I could say it's young adult friendly, because if you want to break in mature teenagers to seeing sex in books, this is a good way to do it, because it's not very terminology specific, and it's not very dirty and not dirty. I'm trying to not use the term dirty when talking about sex in books, and not use clean when talking about a lack of sex in books. But it's not very steamy or explicit, it's just kind of like, there's sex, yeah, but not really, they never say like sex, or they're very good at dancing around the terminology. But anyway, I thought these ones did a good portrayal for the most part, but it's a good one for if you're breaking in to starting to read sex, and your child is a fantasy reader, and you want them to do it in a relatively, you know, easy to break into manner. And the next one is going to be Breakign Dawn by Stephanie Meyer. Now, I think this, personally, for me, was one of the first times ever that I read sex in young adult books. I was 12. I don't think lots of parents want their kids to be 12, and to be fair, I did read this against my parents' permission. They said no. When I read it the first time, I was like, okay, this is fine, because all the sex scenes fade to black. You don't actually see any sex. But then, what bothered me about this one is that it doesn't make scientific sense, which is why it's in the middle. So it's a good one again if your teen is starting to read sexual scenes in young adult, because it fades to black, but it still discusses things. Yeah, it just doesn't make scientific sense, because the vampires don't have blood running through their body. Like, blood doesn't pump in their body, but you need blood for certain things, guys. So it doesn't work. As well as that, his skin is hard as rock. Just doesn't sound pleasant to me. Okay, let's just put this one down. Okay, next up we have the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Marissa Meyer. The sex starts in book 1, but then it takes it to another level in book 2. And all I can say is that you cannot market these as young adult fantasy. There's no way you can do that. This is definitely new adult fantasy, because it's so explicit. It's just so explicit. I don't see how anyone can buy it. I would not buy this for a teenager that was living at home. I would rather they were like 18 and independent, or something like that, before I gave it to them. Like 18 plus. That's when I would feel comfortable with them reading this. And it's very explicit, very explicit. You see the sex, and you get descriptions of everything. Everything's done, like... The good thing about this one is that the sex is kind of very casual. When you love someone, it happens. It is sexual assault. And actually, the good thing about this one is that it flips it. So it's done so that the male is the one who has been abused sexually, and it is very difficult to talk about, because there's manipulation involved and sacrifice in terms of the plot itself and all of that jazz. But it's very unpacked in this one, and it's actually really well discussed, and I like that. I like the way they handle sex in this book and the explicit scenes. I think there's too many explicit scenes, because I was like, get on with the plot, guys. But I think Sarah J. Maas did think about how she was using it, and this one says a lot of good things about feminism and independence in relationships as well. So I think this is actually a really healthy use of explicit scenes in books, and it's done really well. And then this book came along, and it is just, you know, if we had to rate these books on a like 1 to 5 line, this one is at 5. It's one of the best representations of sex in new adult. This is new adult fantasy full show, because the scenes are very explicit, kind of like in A Court of Mist and Fury. You see everything, and all the terminology is used, and it's just very straightforward and explicit, but it is steamy, guys. It's so steamy that it's just so good. But aside from the explicit scenes that are related to the romance and related to the storyline, it also delves back into the past, and the main character has been raped time and time again by a family member, which is just heartbreaking. And it's really heartbreaking, and this one really deals with it very well. It's about being a survivor of sexual assault. You are a victim, but she's not, the victim doesn't define her. Being a victim doesn't define who she is, and the main character has to go through a long line of development to keep surviving day to day, to be comfortable in her sexual self, and also just to, overcome this ordeal that's happened to her, and she's never going to be able to forget it. You don't forget things like that, but I think the book handles the topic so well, so much better than I could ever do. I highly recommend you read it if you like new adult fantasy, and it's not the storyline, but it is a significant portion of the book, and I think that's how it should be, because it's not something you can ignore and not unpack thoroughly, but they still manage to have its own plot and its own storyline that's all fantasy related at the same time. So I just think this book was the perfect balance. And the only book that can trump this book when it comes to doing explicit scenes well in young adult and new adult fantasy is... Let's give a round of applause for The V-Girl by Mya Robarts, because you will never ever read a book that handles sex, virginity, consent and non-consent better than this book. I don't think you can. I just really don't think you can. Mya Robarts must have put so much thought into this book, and everything that she talks about in this book I agreed with. And it was surprising, because when it comes to sex being discussed in books, there's usually something that I disagree with in there, but not in this one, not in this case. It unpacks, you know, consent, non-consent, rape, sexual assault, it just everything, and it goes through everything. It talks about slut shaming as well, and women's views about like sex and how they decide to pursue their sexual desires. It also talks about different types of sex, so it's not only like straightforward sex that you're getting that is like the typical usual sex that's discussed in books, but you've also got voyeurism included, you've also got like sexual fantasies included, and the line between what's acceptable and not acceptable there. You've also got like public sex included. There's just, it goes through everything, guys, and it doesn't gloss over anything. It unpacks everything, and that's really important. It might be because one of the main things about this plot is that it's in this world where rape is legal, which you know is already going to open lots of questions, but that could have just been a thing and then she gets on with the plot. But no, she weaves it into the plot, so you've got all these themes unpacking themselves, being developed and all of that, and then you've also got a romantic relationship going through, which is going to be complicated in this world because, you know, the rules of this world, and then you've also got the like dystopian rebellion kind of plotline going through. All of them balanced, done so well, and if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend you do. It is very explicit because it's straightforward, telling you all the things, terminology, you know, if you're going to discuss as much as she does in this book, you have to be straightforward with things, so it is quite explicit. I would recommend it to mature teens and the new adult audience. I read this when I was like 15 for the first time. I reread it this month, but yeah, it's just, I highly recommend it so much, guys. And I would love if more people read it so that we could hear your thoughts and opinions on how well she handles these topics, and there's discussion questions at the back which just make you think about things all the more and more thoroughly. Oh, and don't forget that the third part is coming soon, where I bring some other booktubers into the video and collaborate with them, and they also tell me their thoughts and opinions on this matter, so we get a bit more of a conversation going. So that's it for this video. I would love to know which books that you think handles explicit scenes and sexual topics and themes very well, and which ones you think don't do it very well, because I'm interested in reading more so that I can compare and contrast a bit more and see if I can make a list of books I recommend that handle and unpack and include sexual scenes and themes and topics very well. Right, that's it now. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.